Welcome along to a new segment on this channel. I've recently reached a Patreon goal. That means I'll be aiming to do a video every month. It's going to be a mix of the video essay content you're used to and then what I'm calling the interview series, which will be content more like this, where I'll be interviewing interesting people involved in some of the same sort of work that I've been doing in my activism. So my guest today is Andrew Mackie from FACT, that's Fight Against Conspiracy Theories Aotearoa, and we're going to be talking about the anti-vaccine, anti-mandate group Voices for Freedom. Welcome along, Andrew.
Hello, how's it going?
It's going well, how are you?
I'm alright, yeah.
Thanks for dedicating an evening to doing this. I just want to start with, for any viewers who might not be familiar with them, who are Voices for Freedom and how would you describe the group?
I would describe them as essentially a continuation of the Advanced New Zealand Party. They, in a sense, in a permanent campaign. So one of the founders, Claire Deeks, was the third on the party list for Advance. The other two founders, Libby and Alia, were keen supporters and activists within Advance. So they're also involved in the anti-vax movement before that. So they about maybe 2 months after the election, well, there was a post-election interview with Claire Deeks, and she expressed a desire for Advance party members to form campaigns and to continue the work. And she said, with a she had the survey that they'd done, and there was a particularly significant response from women, and you could see the cogs going in her head, and then about 3 weeks later, they made their first appearance on the Plan B show. And there's also a picture of them meeting the Advance board, so it's pretty obvious that that's where they've come from. So they've grown rapidly since the beginning of 2021. They claim to have 100,000 members in. No, sorry, they claim to have 100,000 people on their mailing list. They claim to have 30 to 40,000 members in 100 groups all around New Zealand. So they're a fairly big movement. They're probably the most significant part of the so-called freedom movement. They're prolific disinformation spreaders. They've got a very sophisticated online communications and social media presence, although they're banned from Facebook. They've had the capability of organising a mass leaflet drop to 2 million households. They run an online channel which puts out about 2 or 3 programs a week. They do pop-up protests. They do legal challenges, for example, to the vaccine rollout for kids. So what do they want? What are they about? They claim that Voices for Freedom, they claim that they want to safeguard and protect freedom, the freedom of New Zealanders, particularly medical freedom, in scare quotes, because basically that's okay. So they claim to want to promote freedom for Kiwis, normal Kiwis, particularly medical freedom, which is a sort of common anti-vax term to disguise what they're about. They're not just about the vaccine, though. They've largely spent their time campaigning against public health measures against COVID, particularly masks and the COVID vaccine. They follow the anti-vax playbook, which has basically got 3 messages. COVID's not dangerous, the vaccine is dangerous, and you can't trust vaccine advocates. Now that spirals out into they now are openly promoting the Great Reset conspiracy theory. So they are promoting a sort of conspiracist, anti-globalist ideology, and mobilizing people around that. And they've recently expressed a desire. They've recently expressed a desire to build a movement to fundamentally change New Zealand society.
So they're not just anti-vaccine, really. I mean, maybe that was the original message, but they seem to have this expanding scope to include all these other things.
So they never were just anti-vax. If you look at the lead, I'm talking about the founders. They were big Trump fans. They were into the Dr. Steele conspiracy theory. There's evidence of Claire Deeks getting her information from QAnon personalities, largely around the sort of idea that the deep state is doing the pandemic. And I wouldn't say she's a QAnon, but she's certainly influenced by it. And the main point is almost that the anti-vax possibly they are anti-vax, but they tie it into a grand conspiracy theory. So in a sense, the point of the movement is to channel people into belief in that ideology. It's to red pill them. It's to red pill people. Effectively, what they do is it's almost like a wedge issue. So they also have talked about free speech, and now they're starting to talk about restoring Kiwi values. So the idea is that they, the other, the big bad other, and associated collaborators internally in New Zealand are intent on harming, taking away our way of life, and they want to stop that. That's the fundamental point.
I think that makes sense, and it ties in with my next question, because I was going to ask, because my work's really focused on the alt-right or the far-right, so I haven't really studied Voices for Freedom in great detail, because I don't categorise them really as part of the far-right. But there's a substantial overlap between a lot of the anti-vaccine movement and the movements I study. So, for example, like Voices for Freedom, I saw were claiming responsibility for half the people at the Parliament protests earlier in the year, and that's maybe the more moderate half, but there's definitely intermingling there. So VFF does come up again and again in the research I'm doing. What would you say is the relationship between Voices for Freedom and the alt-right or the far-right?
Well, one, whether or not, okay, first of all, they're not white supremacists, right? I mean, you could argue they're not blatant racists. I don't think they're racist in an overt sense. I don't think that's what motivates them, like white nationalists. It's more of a sort of civic nationalism. So the question is, to what extent are they right-wing ideologues or grifters that are mobilising conspiracy theories for political ends, or are they conspiracy theorists who are sort of working with right-wing, extreme right-wing people for their conspiracist ends? And in a sense, those two worlds have really come together. If you can sort of see the use of conspiracy theories by the right in America, like the election conspiracy theories, but also you see some of the right Republicans turning up at anti-vax conferences and talking about the Great Reset. So there's a sort of, it's a bit chicken and egg, but you end up in a similar space. I think that the NWO conspiracy theory, which at this point in time is the Great not the Great Replacement. It's not that at all. It's the Great Reset. That is, you can trace it back to sort of John Birch society stuff, and so there's a definite, theme there. There's a definite. They're drawing on ideas that come from quite hard right ideas. Another thing is, it's probably important to make the point that whatever they are and whatever their ideology is, the far right is interested in the movement they've created and the space they've created. And so, in a sense, what you see is that they are sort of marketing funnel. So they'll pique someone's interest. They might be an anti-vax or not want to take the vaccine. They'll pique their interest. They've got like guides on how to pretty much approach people and almost red pill them, ask a question, curious. I think it's having curious conversations, right? And so what people will do is they'll then gradually be invited to a group, and the TV shows they do are where you get to the meat of it. And in some of those, there's the more extreme stuff, and in a sense, they're prepping people to move into an environment. Some of the people that they like, so they'll forward on information from, say, the Epoch Times, right? So if you're coming in and interested in anti-vax, you will see, oh, that's a credible news source. I'll go and have a look at more stuff on there, and then you'll be brought into a sort of right-wing, like info structure
and things. Oh yeah.
Yeah, maybe not that
maybe not
far,
infowars,
but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You're moving that direction. I mean, like you could a lot of what they're saying, it could be said by Alex Jones, but it's not. There is that. I think that some of the guests they have on are if you look into their background, you find that they are formerly associated with the bassists in Germany or the Querdenker lot. So it's almost like people are being brought toward the far right, and the far right is definitely people like Counterspin, Action Zealandia, or I think that's are definitely interested. So in a sense, yeah. And I mean, another thing I'd say is that there's commonalities between. I mean, I'm not saying everyone who's anti-vaxxer is a fascist, because that would be a ridiculous thing to say, right? But there's certain commonalities in the thought. So it would be, I mean, stuff like, I mean, there's the obvious thing, they compared their plight to being in the ghetto, right? Which is sort of implicitly anti-Semitic, right? So there's that stuff going on. They have this idea of a mythic past, like in the olden days when we had Kiwi values and kids got measles, they got over it, and then they, everything was like healthy, normal, and natural. There's a sort of parallel between the sort of natural is good and also anti-intellectualism, right? They totally go out to discredit like scientific authority, medical authority, and they have they're very the ideologies around health are very much like you've got your natural immune system and it's strong, and you're sort of special because your natural immune system is going to see you through, and it's a bit of a sort of, it could shade into a bit of a eugenicist.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen not necessarily for Voices for Freedom as such, but some definitely anti-vaxxers starting to call themselves purebloods, which just sounds so fascist. I mean, maybe they've got it from, I don't know, Harry Potter rather than fascism, but it's that language there around purity and and certain people being naturally healthy and yeah.
I mean, there's also that. I mean, it's like there's a chap called Gorski, David Gorski, who's written an article on that, and he goes through all the he goes through the sort of characteristics, and he even gets to Arbeit macht free, which sounds really extreme, but what it means is that it's the idea that if you work hard on your health by topping yourself with supplements and all that, and living morally, you will be healthy. And it's not, I mean, it's obviously not true, because people get sick for all sorts of reasons, and it's not like their fault. You can't it's not all individual responsibility. It's just a very strange it's a very strange and unrealistic view of physical strength and health, and yeah. But like I say, I'm not saying they're fascist. It's just that there's sort of, it rhymes with it in certain aspects. That's what I'm saying. That's my cop out.
So, looking at some of the material, because I've been looking through some of the material that Facts provided, and I've picked up that Claire Deeks uses the phrase "flood the zone" quite a lot, and this is a phrase that I first heard from former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, and the context of him using it was talking about the media being the real opposition, not the Democratic Party, but the media, and the solution was to flood the zone with shit, essentially meaning counterfactual information in the media with a flood of misinformation. Do you think this is the tactic that Voices for Freedom is using? Just flood the zone with misinformation and with disinformation and falsehoods?
Well, they said it is. I mean,
yeah.
That's what, like, unless she doesn't know what she's saying, then yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious as well. I mean, they've made great efforts. I mean, I don't know. They wouldn't call it misinformation, though, would they?
No, I mean they probably believe that what they're spreading is truth. Yeah, I mean,
They think they're truth seekers and they're spreading the truth. But I mean, in terms of flooding the zone, they do have a channel on Telegram, which is specifically set up to mobilise people to flood comment sections. So that's flooding the zone, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing you've got is quite interesting, because they've got this tight media strategy. They're a strange organisation, and one of the key things that makes them odd is that, I mean, you've got a big campaigning organisation. Normally, organisations that are really keen to speak to the press, but they've sent out messages, and it's very tightly controlled. Don't talk to anyone. Use the messages that we've told you, because I think they're worried, because they know that the people that they have involved have got very strange ideas and will put people off, and so it's almost like it would ruin their strategy for getting people involved.
Yeah, and related to that, one of their previous videos, one of the more recent ones that I watched, they talked about how people are wanting them to get into politics, which I guess where they originated with Advanced New Zealand, but they're talking a lot now about how the focus is going to be on changing the culture, because you change the culture and then that's how you change politics. And this was a familiar idea to me as well, because this is a paraphrase of Breitbart News. Their mantra, politics is downstream from culture. And Bannon was the editor of Breitbart and described it as the platform for the alt-right. So do you think these tactics are coming from these sources, from like Breitbart and Bannon, or do you think it's more indirect, like those ideas just get out there and then groups like VFF adopt them, seeing the utility in those? Or do you think, where do you think that's coming from?
Well, I think it's a pragmatic approach to some extent, because they are they talk about being we. I mean, all that a lot talk about being we the people. Well, look, no, not according to the vote. So I think that they don't want to. I think it's like they want to red pill people, and it's quite a big ask, and so the soft building, is. It's a sensible strategy, isn't it? Because I think they know they're going to have difficulties with the media, and they're going to have difficulty getting their message out, and so organising social movement to some extent and around life's problems is effectively a bit like a culty type thing. I mean, like welcoming people into a group, you love bothering them, you give them social bonds. It does make sense. The bit about culture, the question is, they're talking of this talk of culture change is quite new. So it might be a sort of like we'll slowly build and then go for the electoral stuff later on. But it's quite interesting that they don't say, well, what to change the culture, how, what to, like why would you do that? Like, what are you trying to achieve? And obviously later on you want to, you need power, right? I mean, they came from politics, they probably want to go back. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it comes directly from, I'm not sure they're like that ideological, if you know what I mean. I don't know that they actually sit there and draw up the strategy from Steve Bannon's handbook. If you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I think
it's not that deep.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some weird stuff around. You might have to help me with this. Is it Cali? The stuff around rebirth of society. There's this whole millenarian thing they've got going on, where this big power, which is the NWO or whatever, is trying to take away everything that you hold dear and kill your kids through the vaccine and all that. And there's going to be a food collapse, there's going to be energy collapse, there's going to be, riots and stuff, and it's all culminating to a point. And then we'll have this event where they'll stand up for themselves, and then we'll return to this period of, I don't know, Kiwi values, right? And it is a bit of, it's a bit of a, I'm sure Steve Bannon's talked about the idea of phases of history and the colour. I can't remember.
The colour yoga, yeah, because he's very into Julius Evola and that sort of philosophy and ages of decline and all that stuff. So
you get the sense that there's a sort of like a decadence that we've all become too reliant on the threatening machine or the system, and they want to wean us off it, and we need to pull up our socks and grow our own food, and somehow that will change the culture. I don't know, it's odd.
And that kind of ties in with like the whole like Doomsday prepper stuff, which seems to overlap, not really in this country, but like in North America, overlaps with like the militia movement and sovereign citizens, and those are ideas that are starting to make their way in here as well.
Yeah, and they don't, they flirted a bit with it. This prepping stuff from them is quite new, and it's not like it. And I think it's just in ether, and they, they're all talking about it. I remember seeing Carl Chapman talking about it, like last year. He was talking about prepping, so in a sense, Voices of Freedom are catching up.
The question I'm always asked, whether I'm talking about Voices for Freedom, which I don't that much, or whether I'm talking about counterspin media, is who's funding them? Who's funding them? This is what you got to find out. And that's almost impossible, really, to find out, because they're just going to tell you that they're funded by donations from their supporters, and they'll use phrases like the people or ordinary Kiwis, and that may well be true. If it is true, it would make Voices for Freedom one of the most successful non-profit groups in the country, to get an advertising budget that covers the millions of flyers and the billboards and their other advertising. Do you have any idea where all of this money is coming from?
No, because it's deliberately been set up that way. I mean, they said they're going to be a charity, and then they changed their mind and they became a private company, so they don't have to tell anyone. I'm not actually that convinced that. I mean, there's this idea that they're getting these massive amounts of money from, I don't know, Putin or something, or maybe Steve Bannon. I think that's a bit of a conspiracy theory, to be honest. Yeah. And also, and they might be, but they probably aren't. I think that they do have the capability. The point is, they have the capability of raising money because they've got backgrounds in multi-level marketing, and so their marketing's very good. Their merch, they've had merch all along. I think they've told us that they've got money from rich donors to do the legal. And I do think that they've got quite a big membership. So like crowdfunding is not, they could do what they've said. They could be putting on it. I think they get a lot of support in kind. People donating their services for free. So it's a mystery, but we should take responsibility for it as New Zealanders. And I think that the blame, shadowy foreign influences is sort of dodging the issue a bit.
Yeah. I think often with these things, people want to blame foreign influence because they like to tell themselves that, like, oh, we don't have this here, we don't have people like this here. We very much do, really.
It makes it more interesting as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think, like, if you think about like some of the anti-marriage stuff from a few years back, you only need a few rich people, or one. I mean, there was a chap from Groundswell. Oh no, it was against the Three Waters, and he was basically going, I've got a mate who's got 80 million sitting, he doesn't know what to do with it, and he's going to give it to me if you don't do what I say, right? To a councillor. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure there are people like that sitting around who are quite interested in maybe destabilising the government for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, we don't know. That's the answer. We don't know where the money's coming from.
Yeah.